But before I tell you how we got here, before I share how this public confrontation became our liberation, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and strength, and drop a comment below telling me your thoughts. Your support means everything, and it helps others find these stories when they need them most. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, 6 years before that fateful birthday party. The first time I truly understood I was invisible in my own family, I was 8 months pregnant with Maya, my swollen feet barely fitting into the only pair of decent shoes I owned. I had rehearsed what I would say to my father a dozen times during the drive to his office. $3,000. That was all I needed. Just $3,000 to cover the medical expenses my insurance had denied, the ones the billing department kept calling about with increasing urgency. I had a payment plan drafted, interest calculations ready, a timeline for repayment. I was prepared to beg if necessary. Arthur Vance's office was everything you would expect from a self-made real estate mogul. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, imported leather furniture, walls lined with awards and photos of him shaking hands with governors and celebrities. I waited in the lobby for 20 minutes past my scheduled appointment time, watching his assistant field calls with the efficiency of a military operation. When she finally nodded me in, I walked through those mahogany doors with my folder of documents clutched against my chest like armor. Father didn't look up. He never looked up when I entered a room. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit probably cost more than my monthly salary, and his attention was entirely focused on the stack of contracts spread across his massive desk. I stood there for a full minute, my back aching, my daughter pressing against my ribs, before I cleared my throat. "Father, I wanted to talk to you about something important. I need help with some medical expenses." Was all he offered, still not looking up. I pressed on, my voice smaller than I intended. "It's $3,000. The insurance denied coverage for some prenatal testing, and the hospital is threatening to send it to collections. I have a repayment plan worked out. I could pay you back $50 a week, maybe more if I pick up extra shifts." That's when Julian walked in. My brother didn't knock, didn't apologize for interrupting. He just sauntered into Father's office like he owned it, which in many ways, he did. Julian was 34, 3 years older than me, with Father's sharp features and none of his work ethic. He wore success like a costume, all designer labels and expensive cologne, each piece purchased with Father's money. "Sorry I'm late, Dad," Julian said, dropping into one of the leather chairs across from Father's desk. He finally glanced at me, his eyes flicking over my pregnant belly with something between amusement and disdain. "Oh, Claire is here. This won't take long, will it, sis?" Before I could respond, Father reached into his desk drawer and pulled out his checkbook. My heart leaped. Maybe he had been listening after all. Maybe despite everything, despite all the years of disappointment and distance, he was going to help me. He wrote the check with quick, decisive strokes. Then he slid it across the desk, not to me. To Julian. "This is for the investment opportunity we discussed," Father said to Julian, his voice warm with approval, rich with pride. It was a tone I hadn't heard directed at me since I was 12 years old, before Mother died, before I became the daughter who disappointed him at every turn. "The tech startup in Silicon Valley. I think it's a solid move." Julian picked up the check, and I saw the number before he folded it into his wallet. $50,000. I was asking for $3,000, and Father had just given Julian $50,000 without hesitation, without asking for a repayment plan, without even pausing. "Thanks, Dad," Julian said, grinning. "This is going to be huge. We're talking Series A funding round, potential for 10 times return on investment." I stood there, frozen, feeling my daughter kick inside me, as if she too could sense the injustice of the moment. Father finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in his gaze, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. "Clara," he said, his tone shifting to the one he used with underperforming employees. "You need to learn financial responsibility. Having a child is a choice that comes with consequences. Perhaps if you had made better decisions, if you had married well instead of insisting on that nursing degree and that unfortunate relationship, you wouldn't be in this position." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak, couldn't defend myself, couldn't explain that my nursing degree was something I had earned, that healthcare was meaningful work, that being a single mother wasn't a moral failing but a circumstance I was navigating with every ounce of strength I possessed. Julian leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the show. "Come on, Dad. Cut her some slack. Clara's trying her best." His tone was mockery disguised as defense. It's not her fault, she doesn't understand how real wealth is built. $3,000, I finally managed to whisper. That's all I need. Father returned to his contracts, the dismissal clear. I'm not running a charity, Clara. You're 31 years old. Figure it out. I walked out of that office with my folder of carefully prepared documents still clutched to my chest, unopened and irrelevant. In the elevator going down, I caught my reflection in the polished brass doors. I looked exhausted, defeated, and most of all, invisible. I called the hospital from my car and set up a payment plan with interest rates that would take me 2 years to pay off. That was Arthur Vance in a nutshell. A man who had built an empire from nothing and believed that love was a currency to be earned through achievement and compliance. In his rigid worldview, I had failed on both counts. I was the daughter who chose a modest career in healthcare over joining the family business, who had the audacity to pursue passion over profit. I was the woman who got pregnant by a man who left before Maya was even born, a man Father had warned me about, giving him the satisfaction of being right. I was, in his carefully calculated estimation, a disappointment wrapped in a cautionary tale, useful only as an example of what happened when you defied Arthur Vance's vision for your life. But I stayed. Despite everything, despite the humiliation and the hurt, I stayed. I stayed because I believed that family meant something, that blood created obligations that transcended personal pain. I stayed because I hoped that once Maya was born, once Father held his granddaughter in his arms and looked into her eyes, something in his granite heart would soften. I had seen photos of him with me as a baby, rare images where his smile seemed genuine, where his eyes held warmth. Surely that capacity for love still existed somewhere inside him. Surely it would resurface for his granddaughter. I stayed because my mother had died when I was 12, and the Vance family, toxic as it was all I had left. I stayed because I was terrified of being completely alone in the world, of raising a child without any support system at all, even a dysfunctional one. For 5 long years, I performed the role of the grateful, subordinate daughter with the dedication of a method actor. I attended every family dinner at the Vance estate, even after pulling 12-hour double shifts at the hospital, my feet aching and my body begging for rest. I sat at that long dining table in the formal dining room, surrounded by expensive art and fresh flower arrangements, and made polite conversation while my heart slowly hardened. I smiled through Julian's barbed comments about my career. Still changing bedpans, Clara? He would ask with a laugh, usually when Father was within earshot. When are you going to get a real job, something that actually pays? This from a man who played venture capitalist with Father's money, failing upward in business after business that Father's connections and capital always managed to rescue. The tech startup Father had given him $50,000 for had folded within 8 months. Father had simply moved him to the next opportunity, explaining away the loss as a learning experience. I watched my father pour resources into Julian's children, from his picture-perfect marriage to Eleanor, a woman whose warmth was as genuine as a diamond-encrusted smile at a charity gala. Eleanor had the kind of beauty that came from expensive maintenance, all blonde highlights and Botox, yoga-toned body and designer clothes. She had married Julian for his last name and his trust fund, and she played the role of devoted wife with the same calculating precision I imagine she used to select her handbags. They had 3 children, twins Oliver and Olivia, now 10 years old, and the youngest, Sebastian, who was 7. Each of their birthdays was a catered affair with ponies, magicians, bounce houses, and guest lists that rivaled corporate events. Father spared no expense. Maya's birthdays were different. Painfully, obviously different. For her 3rd birthday, I gathered my courage and asked if we could use the Vance estate's garden for a small party. Nothing elaborate, just a few of Maya's friends from daycare, some balloons, a cake. Father agreed, and I spent 2 weeks planning, buying decorations with money I couldn't afford to spend, baking practice cakes to make sure Maya's would be perfect. 2 days before the party, Father called. The garden won't be available this weekend after all. Julian's twins have a soccer tournament, and Eleanor wants to host a celebration afterward for the team. But Father, I sent out invitations. Maya's been talking about nothing else. Then you should have consulted the family calendar. I'm sure you can find somewhere else. I ended up hosting Maya's 3rd birthday party at a McDonald's playplace. Maya didn't complain. She never complained, but I saw the confusion in her eyes when I told her the garden party wasn't happening. I saw her trying to understand what she had done wrong. For her 4th birthday, I learned my lesson. I planned a simple celebration at a local park, no involvement from the Vance estate whatsoever. We had a picnic blanket, sandwiches I made myself, and a small cake. It was modest but filled with love. Maya's face glowed as she played with her friends on the swings. Then Julian showed up an hour late with his entire family. Eleanor materialized with her professional camera, positioning Oliver, Olivia, and Sebastian around Maya, taking dozens of photos. "This is such a cute little setup." Eleanor cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "So rustic!" She posted 37 photos to her social media that evening. The caption read, "Family is everything. So blessed to share this special day with our little niece. Number family first, number Vance legacy, number blessed." Maya appeared in 3 of those 37 photos, always in the background, always slightly out of focus, always secondary to her cousins who dominated the frame. By Maya's 5th birthday, I had learned to keep our celebrations small and private. Just the 2 of us, a homemade cake decorated with her favorite colors, and a movie night with popcorn and hot chocolate. Maya never complained about the lack of ponies or magicians or bouncy houses, but I saw how her face would light up like a sunrise when she received invitations to her cousins' elaborate parties. I saw that light dim like a dying bulb when she compared those gilded celebrations to our humble ones. I watched her start to shrink herself at family gatherings, observed with breaking heart as she learned to be quiet and unobtrusive, perfecting the art of taking up as little space as possible. She stopped asking why Grandpa never wanted to hold her hand the way he did with Oliver and Olivia. She stopped expecting to sit on his lap when he read stories, stopped hoping he would attend her school plays, the way he never missed the twins' soccer games, and I told myself stories to make it bearable. I told myself I was protecting her by staying connected to the family, that witnessing some familial affection, even secondhand, was better than having no grandparents at all. I told myself that some love was better than no love, that some stability was better than none, that I was being practical and mature by accepting what I could get. I told myself that the financial crumbs father occasionally threw my way, the guilt checks that appeared unpredictably in my mailbox, the half-hearted offers to cover Maya's preschool when he remembered she existed, were signs that he cared in his own twisted, emotionally stunted way. I told myself that Julian's cruelty was just sibling rivalry, the kind of thing that happened in all families, that his constant undermining was just competitiveness gone slightly too far. I told myself that Eleanor's calculated coldness was simply a mother protecting her own children's position in the family hierarchy, that her social media performances weren't personal attacks but just her way of seeking validation. I told myself so many lies, constructed such elaborate justifications, that I almost believed them. Almost. The breaking point came 3 weeks before Maya's 8th birthday. She had been talking about this birthday for months, planning it with the kind of detailed attention that broke my heart. Not because she wanted something extravagant or expensive, but because she had finally worked up the courage to ask if she could have a real party with her school friends. Just cupcakes, some streamers and balloons, and the kids from her 2nd grade class in our modest backyard. She had even drawn invitations by hand, each one decorated with careful attention, her little tongue poking out in concentration as she colored, her hand cramping from gripping the markers too tightly. "Mommy, do you think they'll really come?" she had asked me one evening, holding up her latest invitation for my approval. "Of course they will, baby. Your friends love you. But what if they think it's boring? Olivia had a princess party with real horses last year." I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in mine. "Maya, anyone who comes to your party will have a wonderful time because you're wonderful, and you know what makes a party special? It's not horses or castles. It's being surrounded by people who care about you." She had smiled at that, reassured, and gone back to her invitations with renewed enthusiasm. I was so proud of her initiative, so moved by her hope and effort, that I broke my own hard-learned rule. I went to Father's office to ask for his blessing and maybe, just maybe, a small contribution to help make it special. Nothing extravagant, just enough to rent a few party games, buy some nice decorations, make Maya feel celebrated in a way she had never been before. I found him where he always was, reviewing contracts in his office, the city skyline spread out behind him like a conquered kingdom. Julian was there too, lounging in one of the leather chairs with the casual arrogance of someone who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. He was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my presence when I walked in. "Father," I began, my voice stronger than I felt, "I wanted to talk to you about Maya's birthday next weekend." That's when everything fell apart. I barely got the words out before Father cut me off, his voice flat and decisive. He didn't even look up from his papers. "Maya's birthday party this weekend needs to be canceled." Julian has informed me that his children are feeling neglected. The words hit me like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. I actually felt dizzy. What? Father, Maya has been planning this for months. She made invitations by hand. She invited her friends from school. They're expecting to come. Julian laughed, actually laughed, a sharp bark of amusement that echoed in the high-ceilinged office. Come on, Clara. You're being overly dramatic again. It's just a backyard party with some kids and store-bought cupcakes. We're talking about children eating cake and playing pin the tail on the donkey. Hardly a life-changing event. It's life-changing to Maya, I said, my voice shaking now, trembling with the effort of holding back tears and rage in equal measure. She's 8 years old, and she's never had a real birthday party with her friends. Never. Julian rolled his eyes and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression a mixture of condescension and false concern. My therapist says the twins are experiencing trauma from feeling overlooked in the family dynamic. Real trauma, Clara. Sebastian had a nightmare about being forgotten. Eleanor and I have been in family counseling about this. Their emotional needs take priority here. Surely you can understand that. I turned to face Julian fully, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. Feeling overlooked? Julian, you just took them skiing in Aspen last week. Your children have had 3 birthday parties this year alone, not including the trips to Disneyland and Hawaii. This is one afternoon with homemade cupcakes and Maya's school friends in our backyard. That's exactly the problem, Julian continued, warming to his argument. The disparity. When my kids see Maya getting attention, even at her own birthday party, they feel diminished. It's a competition for resources, and we need to be mindful of their psychological well-being. I stared at him, stunned into momentary silence by the sheer absurdity of his argument. Are you actually serious right now? You're saying Maya can't have one birthday party because it might hurt your children's feelings to know she exists? Father finally looked up from his papers, and the coldness in his eyes froze the words in my throat. His gaze held no sympathy, no recognition of the insanity of this conversation, just irritation at having his work interrupted and disappointment that I was questioning his judgment. He stood slowly, deliberately, and walked to the window overlooking his perfectly manicured garden where Maya would never have her party. You don't understand the issue, Clara. You never have. His voice was measured, controlled, the tone of a CEO delivering bad news to an underperforming employee. This is about family image. We cannot have outsiders, strangers from Maya's school, witnessing any discord or disparity within the Vance family. Julian represents the future of Vance Properties. He is my successor, my legacy. His children are positioned to take over the business I've spent my life building. Their emotional well-being, their sense of security within the family hierarchy, is the priority. He turned back to me, his gaze sharp as broken glass, cutting and cold. Don't be selfish, Clara. Think about the bigger picture. Think about the family as a whole, not just your own desires. This discussion is over. Selfish? The word came out as a whisper. You're calling me selfish for wanting my daughter to have one birthday party? I'm calling you selfish for putting your daughter's temporary disappointment above the psychological needs of 3 children. Mathematics, Clara. 3 is greater than 1. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something, anything, some sign that he realized how monstrous this was. But Father had already returned to his contracts. Julian was back on his phone, and I had been dismissed. I left his office in a daze, my legs moving on autopilot. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my car keys. I dropped them twice in the elevator, each metallic clatter echoing in the small space like the sound of my dignity shattering. I sat in my car in Father's circular driveway, staring at my phone, and I did something I knew I would regret. I called Julian. Maybe if I could reach him without Father there, without the performance of family hierarchy, maybe I could find some shred of humanity in my brother. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear music and laughter in the background, the ambient sounds of wealth and leisure. He was at some upscale event, living his best life while casually destroying my daughter's happiness. "What's up, sis?" His voice dripped with false cheer, the tone of someone who had already forgotten our conversation and couldn't understand why I was still upset. "Julian, please." My voice cracked. Maya has been looking forward to this party for months. She drew 22 invitations by hand. She's been crossing off days on her calendar. Can't you talk to Father? Can't we figure out a compromise? What if we did it on a different weekend? What if I promised to keep it small and quiet? His laughter was cruel, genuinely amused. Oh, Clara, you're always so dramatic about everything. It's exhausting. It's just a party. Just one day. Your kid will get over it. She shouldn't have to get over it, Julian. She deserves to be celebrated. She deserves to matter. Or are you jealous? His tone shifted, became pointed. Is this really about Maya's party, or is it about the fact that father isn't funding your little projects anymore? Because if you need money, Clara, maybe you should have made better life choices. I could hear him sipping something, probably champagne or some expensive cocktail. Could hear a woman's laugh in the background. Probably someone from his social circle who had no idea what kind of man he really was. Here's some free advice, Julian continued, his voice taking on the condescending tone of someone who believed they were being generous with their wisdom. Be a better mother and teach your kid that she doesn't always get what she wants. That's a valuable life lesson right there. The world doesn't revolve around any one person, especially not children. You're actually doing her a disservice by making such a big deal about this. You're teaching her to be entitled. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, not yet, but definitely cracked. I could feel the fault line spreading through my chest, through all the years of accumulated hurt and swallowed anger. I hung up without responding and drove home in complete silence. No radio, no podcast, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional sob I couldn't quite suppress. Maya was with Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who sometimes babysat when I had to work late or, like today, when I had to visit father. I picked her up, thanked Mrs. Chen with a smile I didn't feel, and brought Maya home. She chattered happily the entire way, bouncing in her booster seat, talking about her day at school, about how she had given out 3 more invitations, and everyone was so excited to come to her party. Emma said her mom is going to bring a camera to take pictures, and Tyler said he's going to bring me a present even though I said he didn't have to. Isn't that nice, Mommy? I can't wait. Only 3 more weeks. That's wonderful, baby, I managed, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not yet. Not when her face was glowing with joy. Not when she was bouncing with excitement. Not when she was experiencing the simple, pure happiness that every child deserved to feel about their birthday. I would have to tell her eventually, but I couldn't destroy that joy in this moment. I wasn't strong enough. That night, I went through all the motions of normalcy. I made dinner, helped Maya with her homework, gave her a bath, read her a bedtime story. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from her day, and I tucked her in with her favorite blanket pulled up to her chin. Before I left her room, I noticed something that made my heart shatter into a million pieces. She was clutching one of her hand-drawn invitations, holding it against her chest like a treasured possession, a small smile on her sleeping face. She had drawn herself in the center, surrounded by her friends, all of them holding balloons. The word happy was written across the top in careful, colorful letters. I stood in her doorway for a long time, just watching her sleep, watching her chest rise and fall with each innocent breath. This was my daughter, my beautiful girl who asked for so little and deserved so much. And I had failed her. I had let my father and brother take even this small joy from her because I was too afraid, too conditioned to obedience, too desperate for their approval even after years of evidence that it would never come. I walked downstairs to our small living room and sat in the dark, crying silently for 2 hours. I cried for Maya, for the childhood I couldn't give her, for all the ways I had let her down by staying connected to people who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. I cried for myself, for the daughter I had been, still trying to earn love from a man who didn't know how to give it. I cried for my mother, dead 16 years now, wondering what she would think of the woman I had become, wondering if she would be disappointed that I had tolerated this treatment for so long. By the time dawn broke through our thin curtains, painting the room in shades of gray and gold, I had made my decision. I had cried myself empty and found something harder in the hollow space where my hope used to be. I went to the small home office I had set up in what used to be a storage closet, a cramped space barely big enough for a desk and a filing cabinet, but mine, private, a place where I could keep records away from Maya's curious eyes. I pulled out all the financial records I had been keeping, documenting every time father had promised support and failed to deliver, every birthday check that never came, every medical expense he had refused to help with despite his millions. I gathered every time Julian had undermined me professionally, every call he had made to my hospital supervisor with false concerns about my mental stability, every email he had sent to colleagues suggesting I was unreliable, unstable, a single mother barely holding it together. I collected every dismissive text message and every passive-aggressive email from Eleanor with her veiled insults about my parenting, her suggestions that Maya would be better off with more stable influences, her social media posts designed to highlight my inadequacy. I had been documenting everything for 3 years, not because I planned to use it, but because some part of me knew I might need protection someday. I had been building a case without realizing it, gathering evidence of a pattern I had been unwilling to name. Then I did what I should have done years ago, what I should have done the day Father gave Julian $50,000 while refusing me $3,000, what I should have done after the first canceled birthday party. I hired a lawyer. David Chen was the brother-in-law of my supervisor at the hospital. He specialized in family law and had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. When I met with him in his modest but professional office, I laid out everything. The financial manipulation, the emotional abuse, the way Father had frozen access to a joint emergency account that my mother had set up for me before she died. David listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Clara, I'm going to be honest with you. Your family is wealthy and connected. This won't be easy. But you have documentation, and more importantly, you have a clear case for financial abuse and emotional manipulation. The account your mother set up, that's legally yours. We can get that back. As for the rest, I recommend you start creating distance, real distance." "I need to tell my daughter her party is canceled." David shook his head. "Don't cancel it. Go ahead with the party. Don't tell your father or brother. Let them think you've complied. Document everything they do from this point forward. And Clara?" He looked at me seriously. "Start thinking about what life looks like completely separate from them. Because once we start this process, there's no going back." I went home and did exactly what David suggested. I told Maya her party was still on. I watched her face light up with such pure joy that I knew, beyond any doubt, that I was making the right choice. Over the next 2 weeks, while I prepared for Maya's party, I also prepared for war. I told Father and Julian nothing. When Father called to confirm I had handled the situation, I simply said, "It's been taken care of. Let him assume what he wanted." I documented every call, every text. When Julian started spreading rumors at my workplace again, I reported it to HR with evidence. When Eleanor posted another series of perfect family photos on social media, conspicuously excluding Maya and me, I screenshot them with timestamps. I also started looking for a new place to live. I found a small but clean apartment complex across town, managed by a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Gable. When she asked why I was moving, something in her expression made me tell her the truth. She listened, nodded once, and said, "I've seen this before. Families that treat love like a business transaction. You're doing the right thing. And here's some advice. Document everything. Keep every message, every email. Record phone calls if your state allows it. Storms don't stop just because you leave the house." Maya's 8th birthday party was perfect. 12 kids from her class came to our tiny backyard. We played games, ate cupcakes I had stayed up until midnight to frost, and Maya's laughter echoed off the fence in a way I had never heard before. For 3 beautiful hours, my daughter was the center of attention, celebrated and loved, and the joy on her face was worth every sleepless night, every moment of fear. Father and Julian didn't show up. They didn't even call. It was the first sign that they knew something had changed, that I was no longer playing by their rules. 2 days later, I got a call from my bank. The emergency account my mother had set up had been frozen by Father, who claimed it was part of a trust fund dispute. This was his opening move, his way of punishing me for defiance, but I was ready. David filed an emergency motion, and within a week, we were in front of a judge. The evidence was clear. My mother's will explicitly left that account to me, with Father as a custodian only until I turned 25. I was now 32. Father had been illegally controlling access for 7 years. The judge ruled in my favor immediately and ordered Father to restore full access plus interest. I walked out of that courthouse with David beside me and cried in my car. But this time, they were tears of relief and vindication. The real move came 2 weeks later. I packed everything Maya and I owned into a rental truck and moved us to the new apartment across town. Before I left, I did something symbolic that I needed for my own closure. I walked into the Vance estate using my key one last time. The house was empty. Everyone was at some business dinner. I went to the formal living room where a massive family portrait hung on the wall, the kind of portrait that screamed old money and dynasty. It showed Father seated in the center, Julian and Eleanor with their 3 children arranged perfectly on one side, and me standing awkwardly on the edge with infant Maya in my arms, looking like an afterthought. I pulled out a black permanent marker from my purse. My hand was steady as I drew a single, definitive line through my face in the portrait. Not angry or jagged, just clean and final. I placed my house key on the mahogany table beneath the portrait and walked out. I didn't look back. The first few months in our new life were harder than I had anticipated. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to cover costs. Maya adjusted to her new school better than I expected, making friends quickly and thriving in an environment where she wasn't constantly compared to her cousins. But Father and Julian weren't done with me. Father didn't just call, he escalated. He had his lawyers send threatening letters about alienation from family and denying Maya her heritage. Julian took a different approach. He started calling my workplace, not just once but repeatedly, leaving messages with my supervisor expressing concern about my mental state. He sent emails suggesting I was unstable, that I needed psychological evaluation. He even showed up at the hospital once, making a scene in the lobby about being worried for his niece's safety. Eleanor's contribution was more insidious. She ramped up her social media presence, posting daily about their perfect, complete family. Photos of the twins' soccer games, Sebastian's music recitals, family dinners at expensive restaurants. Each post included captions about loyalty, family bonds, and subtle digs at people who abandoned their roots. The message was clear. I was the villain in their narrative, the ungrateful daughter who had rejected everything Father had built. The psychological warfare was exhausting. I came home from 12-hour shifts to find passive-aggressive texts from Julian, manipulative voicemails from Father, and screenshots from well-meaning acquaintances showing me Eleanor's latest post. There were days when I questioned everything, days when I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, if I should have just endured it for Maya's sake, if cutting off from family made me selfish. Mrs. Gable found me crying on the apartment stairs one evening after a particularly brutal day. She sat down beside me, her bony hand patting my shoulder. "You know what they're doing, don't you? They're trying to break you down, make you come crawling back. Don't give them that satisfaction. You and that little girl, you're doing just fine." She was right, but fine wasn't enough. I needed to build something sustainable. I started looking into side businesses I could run from home, something flexible that would let me spend more time with Maya while bringing in additional income. I had always loved baking. It was how I de-stressed after difficult shifts. Maya and I would spend Sunday mornings creating elaborate cakes and cookies, just for fun. One day, Maya's teacher called to ask if I would consider making cupcakes for the school's bake sale. I agreed and made 3 dozen. They sold out in 20 minutes. A parent tracked down my phone number and asked if I took orders for birthday cakes. I said yes before I even thought about it. That's how Maya's Sweet Moments was born. I started small, taking orders through word of mouth, baking after Maya went to bed and during my days off. Maya helped with decorations, her careful little hands creating fondant flowers and sugar butterflies. She loved it, and more importantly, she loved that it was our thing, something we built together. The business grew faster than I anticipated. Within 6 months, I had a steady stream of orders. Within a year, I was able to cut back my hospital shifts. Mrs. Gable let me use her larger kitchen for bigger orders, refusing to take any rent. "Consider it my investment in seeing you succeed," she said with a wink. Meanwhile, David Chen helped me file for a permanent restraining order against Julian after he showed up at Maya's school, trying to take her out of class. The school had clear instructions not to release her to anyone but me, so they called security immediately. Julian was escorted off campus while causing a scene that was witnessed by dozens of parents and staff. That incident gave us the evidence we needed. The restraining order was granted. Father received a cease and desist letter regarding his harassment. The letters from his lawyers stopped. But I knew Arthur Vance well enough to know that silence from him didn't mean acceptance. It meant strategy. As Maya's 9th birthday approached, I was in a completely different place than I had been a year before. My baking business was thriving. I had moved us to a slightly larger apartment in the same complex. Maya was flourishing at her school, confident and happy in a way she had never been before. She had real friends who appreciated her for who she was, not for her connection to the Vance name. I decided to throw her the party she deserved, not elaborate or expensive, but full of love and joy. I reserved the apartment complex's shared backyard space. I invited her entire class, plus some neighbors and the few genuine friends I had maintained. Mrs. Gable insisted on helping with decorations. Maya and I spent 2 days creating a magnificent 2-tiered birthday cake. decorated with her favorite colors and topped with fresh flowers. The party was set for a Saturday afternoon. I had learned from David to always be prepared for the worst, so I mentioned the party to him in passing. He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do you think they'll show up?" I said I hoped they wouldn't. He said, "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I'll stop by if that's okay, just to make sure things stay peaceful." I agreed, grateful for his foresight. The party started at 2 o'clock. By 2:15, our backyard was filled with children's laughter, colorful balloons, and pure happiness. Maya wore a dress she had picked out herself, a bright yellow thing that made her look like sunshine. She was playing tag with her friends, her face flushed with joy. When they arrived, I saw the black Mercedes pull into the parking lot at 2:30. My stomach dropped. Father and Julian stepped out, both wearing expensive suits like they were attending a board meeting, not a child's birthday party. They walked through the open gate into the backyard, and the atmosphere changed immediately. Kids stopped playing, parents turned to stare, my hands clenched at my sides. Father surveyed the scene with barely concealed disdain: paper plates, homemade decorations, children running around on grass that needed mowing. This was everything he despised about my choices. He spotted Maya and started walking toward her. I intercepted him, placing myself between my father and my daughter. "You need to leave." My voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Father's expression was ice cold. "I came to collect my granddaughter. She doesn't belong in this squalor. This is our home, and you weren't invited. You need to leave now." Julian stepped forward, that familiar smirk on his face. "Look at you, Clara. Playing house in this dump. A single mom failure making cheap cupcakes for pocket change. You really think you can survive without this family?" I felt every eye on us. Parents were pulling out phones. Kids had stopped playing entirely. Maya was standing frozen near the cake table, her yellow dress bright against the suddenly tense backdrop. "We're doing just fine," I said firmly. "Better than we ever did in that mansion of lies." Julian's smirk vanished. He took a step toward me, his voice low and threatening. "You're poisoning that child against her family, against her grandfather. You're selfish and vindictive, and I'm done watching you destroy what Father built." He reached past me, trying to grab Maya's arm. I pushed him back, hard. "Don't you dare touch my daughter." That's when Julian lost control. He shoved me, hard, with both hands. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the edge of the table where Maya's birthday cake sat. The impact sent the cake tumbling to the ground. 2 tiers of careful decoration, hours of work, Maya's excited anticipation, all of it crashed to the grass in a mess of frosting and broken cake. The backyard went completely silent. Then Maya's voice cut through the stillness, clear and fierce. "You're a bad man. Leave my mom alone." Phones were everywhere now, at least a dozen people recording. Julian looked around, finally seeming to realize what he had done, the audience he had, the evidence being created in real time. Father's face was red with barely contained rage, but I saw something else there too: fear. For the first time in my life, Arthur Vance looked afraid. That's when David Chen walked through the gate, his timing perfect. He surveyed the scene calmly, noting the destroyed cake, my disheveled appearance, Julian's aggressive stance, the phones recording everything. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Vance." He addressed both Father and Julian formally. "The assault and trespassing that just occurred has been witnessed and recorded by numerous individuals. The police are already on their way. I strongly suggest you remain exactly where you are." Father's face went from red to pale. Julian started to protest, started to explain, but David cut him off. "I would recommend you say nothing further. Everything you say is being recorded." The police arrived within 5 minutes. Mrs. Gable had called them the moment she saw Father and Julian arrive. She had been watching from her window, as prepared as David. The officers took statements from multiple witnesses. They reviewed video footage from 3 different phones. Julian was arrested for assault. Father was escorted away with warnings about trespassing and violating the boundaries of the previous cease and desist. As they were led away, I saw Father look back at me one last time. The great Arthur Vance, in handcuffs, being put into a police car in front of dozens of witnesses. His empire, his carefully constructed image of family unity and business success, crumbling in a suburban apartment complex's backyard. The party was ruined, but Maya's friends' parents were incredibly kind. Several of them stayed to help clean up. Someone went and bought a store cake. Another parent organized the kids for games. By the time the police were done with statements and the sun was starting to set, Maya had actually had a memorable birthday, just not in the way any of us had planned. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat with David and Mrs. Gable in my small living room. David explained what would happen next. The assault charges are solid. Multiple witnesses, video evidence. Julian will likely take a plea deal, probably probation and anger management, but the real impact will be the publicity. He was right. By the next morning, the videos had gone viral. Real estate heir attacks sister at child's birthday party was trending on multiple platforms. News outlets picked it up. The Vance property's stock price dropped 7% in a single day. Father's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Over the next few weeks, I watched the Vance empire implode from a safe distance. The assault video sparked investigations into Julian's business practices. Turns out that when you shine a spotlight on someone like Julian, you find lots of shady dealings. Investors pulled out. Partners backed away. Father, trying to salvage what he could, was forced by his board to step down as CEO. Eleanor, ever the opportunist, filed for divorce from Julian within 2 weeks of the incident. She used the assault video as evidence of his violent tendencies and secured full custody of their children, plus a significant settlement. She even reached out to me once, not to apologize, but to suggest we team up against the Vance men. I politely declined. Eleanor's motivation was financial gain, not genuine change. I received hate mail from some of Father's business associates and old family friends, calling me ungrateful, vindictive, a destroyer of families. But I received far more messages of support. From distant cousins who had their own stories of Arthur Vance's cruelty. From former employees who had been mistreated. From women who saw in my story echoes of their own struggles with toxic family dynamics. With David's help, I filed for and received a permanent restraining order against both Father and Julian. They were legally prohibited from contacting me or Maya or coming within 500 feet of us. Arthur Vance, who had controlled every aspect of my life for 32 years, no longer had any power over me. Maya's sweet moments continued to grow. Word of mouth from the party, combined with the publicity, actually brought in more business. People wanted to support the single mom who had stood up to her wealthy, abusive family. Within 6 months, I had enough saved to rent a small storefront. Within a year, I had hired 2 part-time employees. The business I had started as a side hustle to spend more time with my daughter had become a genuine success story. Maya thrived. Without the constant comparison to her cousins, without the toxic environment of the Vance family gatherings, she blossomed into a confident, creative, compassionate child. She made honor roll at school. She joined the art club and discovered a passion for painting. She had real friendships based on genuine connection, not social climbing or family obligation. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about Father and Julian. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Father had become a recluse, unable to show his face in his former social circles. Julian's business ventures had all failed, and he was working a regular corporate job for the first time in his life, his trust fund depleted by legal fees and Eleanor's divorce settlement. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction at their downfall, but mostly, I just felt free. Mrs. Gable became like the grandmother Maya had never really had. She taught Maya to knit and shared stories about her own life, about her own escape from a controlling marriage decades ago. "The world wants women to be small and compliant," she told Maya once while I was listening from the doorway. "Don't ever let anyone make you smaller than you are." A year after that disastrous birthday party, we held Maya's 10th birthday celebration in the backyard of our own little house. I had saved enough to buy a small 2-bedroom place with a yard. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't in an exclusive neighborhood, but it was ours, truly ours, and it was filled with love. This time, 50 people came to celebrate Maya. Her classmates, her teachers, our neighbors, the parents who had become genuine friends, David Chen and his family, Mrs. Gable, even some of my co-workers from the hospital. We had food trucks instead of catered meals, games organized by volunteers instead of hired entertainers, and a cake that Maya and I had made together, just like always. As I watched Maya blow out her candles, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was, not for her last name or her potential usefulness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the deep, soul-level peace that comes from living authentically, from protecting what matters, from choosing yourself and your child over toxic expectations. The local news ran a follow-up story on us, a feel-good piece about the woman who stood up to her abusive family and built a successful business. They interviewed Maya, asking her what she had learned from everything that happened. She thought for a moment, then said, I learned that family is the people who make you feel safe and loved, not just the people you're related to. I couldn't have said it better myself. In the final months of that year, I did something I had never done before. I went to therapy. Not because I was broken or damaged, but because I wanted to understand why it had taken me so long to leave, why I had accepted crumbs of affection as if they were banquets, why I had believed that I deserved the treatment I received. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Rodriguez, helped me unpack 32 years of conditioning, helped me see the patterns of control and manipulation that I had normalized. You were trained from childhood to believe your worth was conditional, Dr. Rodriguez explained during one session. Your father made love a transaction. You had to earn it through compliance and sacrifice. But Clara, love shouldn't have conditions. Real love, healthy love, is given freely. I cried a lot in therapy. I grieved the father I had wanted, the family I had hoped for, the version of my childhood I had convinced myself existed. But I also celebrated the strength I had found, the boundaries I had learned to set, the life I was building brick by brick. One day, I received a letter. Not from Father or Julian, but from Oliver, Julian's son, now 14 years old. The letter was short and carefully written. He thanked me for teaching him what courage looked like. He said that watching what happened had made him question things in his own family, made him realize that his father's behavior wasn't normal or acceptable. He said he hoped that one day, when he was older, he could talk to me and Maya, get to know us properly. I cried reading that letter, but they were good tears. Evidence that even in toxic families, truth has a way of seeping through the cracks. I wrote back, keeping it brief but warm. I told him I was proud of him for questioning, for thinking critically, for having the courage to reach out. I told him that when he was ready, our door would be open. Not the door back into the Vance family drama, but the door to genuine, healthy relationship. My life now looks nothing like what I imagined when I was younger. I'm not wealthy. I don't have the social status that comes with the Vance name. I don't attend charity galas or have my photo in society pages. But I wake up every morning without dread. I look at my daughter and see her thriving, not shrinking. I run a business I built with my own hands. I have friends who value me, not for what I can provide. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting off my family. The question always strikes me as odd, as if maintaining a relationship with people who abuse you is somehow noble. I don't regret it for a second. What I regret is how long I stayed, how many years I wasted hoping that people who had shown me exactly who they were would somehow magically change. The Vance Properties empire eventually recovered, though not to its former glory. Father sold his majority share and retired completely. Julian remarried, to someone equally vapid as Eleanor, and from what I hear, he's still the same entitled narcissist, just with less money. Eleanor moved to California with her children and became some sort of influencer, still posting perfect family photos and motivational quotes about resilience. I don't follow any of them on social media. I don't keep tabs on their lives. That chapter is closed, and I have no interest in reopening it. Maya is 12 now as I write this. She's in middle school, thriving academically and socially. She's asked questions about her grandfather and uncle, about why we don't see them anymore. I've answered her honestly, in age-appropriate ways, never bad-mouthing them but also never sugarcoating the truth. She deserves to know her story, to understand why we made the choices we made. Last week, she told me she's been journaling about her experiences, thinking she might want to write a book someday about families and resilience. I told her I think that's a beautiful idea, and that whatever she decides to write, I'll support her completely. Maya's Sweet Moments now has 3 locations across the city. I've hired 15 employees, many of them single mothers or women rebuilding their lives after difficult situations. I pay fair wages and offer flexible scheduling because I remember what it was like to desperately need that kind of consideration. My business isn't just about baking cakes. It's about creating opportunities and supporting women who need a chance. Last month, I was invited to speak at a local women's shelter about my journey. Standing in front of 30 women, some fleeing domestic violence, some escaping financial abuse, some just trying to find their footing in a world that had knocked them down repeatedly, I shared my story. I talked about the importance of documentation, of building a support system, of recognizing that leaving is often the most dangerous time but also the most necessary. I talked about the guilt and the fear and the freedom. After I finished, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 22, with a black eye she had tried to cover with makeup. "My family says I'm destroying everything by wanting to leave," she whispered. "They say I'm being selfish, that I should think about them. I looked at her and said, "Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And you deserve to survive. You deserve to thrive." She cried and thanked me, and I gave her David Chen's business card and told her that help was available if she wanted it. That's the thing about surviving toxic families. Once you get out, once you rebuild, you realize how many others are still trapped in that same cycle of abuse disguised as love, of manipulation wrapped in the language of family obligation. And if my story, if my willingness to share the ugliness and the struggle and the ultimate triumph can help even one person recognize they deserve better, then every difficult moment was worth it. The final piece of closure came 2 years after that birthday party confrontation. I received a certified letter from an estate attorney. My grandmother, on my mother's side, whom I had barely known, had passed away and left me a modest inheritance. Not life-changing money, but enough to fully pay off my house and put away a substantial college fund for Maya. The letter explained that my grandmother had wanted to reach out years ago, but father had prevented it, controlling all family communications even with my mother's side of the family. I cried reading that letter. Not just for the inheritance, but for the connection to my mother that I had been denied, for the relationships father had severed in his need to control everything. But I also felt a sense of cosmic justice. My grandmother, even in death, had found a way to support me, to give me one more layer of security and freedom. With that inheritance, I did something important. I set up a small foundation called the Maya Fund, dedicated to helping single mothers escape abusive family situations. We provide small grants for legal fees, first and last month's rent, and emergency expenses. It's not much, but it's something. It's my way of turning pain into purpose, of ensuring that the suffering I endured leads to others suffering less. Today, as I write this final reflection, I'm sitting in my backyard, the same backyard where we celebrated Maya's 10th birthday. The garden has grown. I've learned to cultivate flowers and herbs, finding therapy in the dirt and growth. Maya is inside, doing homework and occasionally bursting into laughter at something on her phone. It's an ordinary evening, beautifully, perfectly ordinary. I think about the woman I was 6 years ago, sitting in my father's office, accepting his dismissal of my daughter's happiness. I think about how I had trained myself to be small, to accept crumbs, to believe that I was the problem. And I think about the journey from that moment to this one, about every difficult choice, every moment of doubt, every small victory that built into this life I now lead. Someone recently asked me if I would go back and change anything if I could. The question made me pause. Would I erase the years of pain? Would I prevent the confrontation at Maya's birthday? Would I somehow fix my relationship with father and Julian? After thinking about it, my answer was no. Every single experience, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones, brought me to this moment. They taught me what I'm capable of, showed me who I am, when I stopped performing for others' approval, revealed the depth of love I have for my daughter and for myself. I wouldn't change it because this life, the one I built from the rubble of a toxic family, is genuinely mine. Every success, every setback, every moment of joy and struggle belongs to me. I'm not living in someone else's shadow or according to someone else's expectations. I'm not auditioning for love or earning my worth through compliance. I'm simply being Clara, and that is enough. Maya just called me inside for dinner. She's made pasta, her specialty, and she's set the table with candles because, as she says, every day is worth celebrating. She learned that from me, and I learned it through the hardest lesson of my life, that you don't need anyone's permission to celebrate your existence, to take up space, to choose happiness. So let me end this story with a question for you. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my early chapters, if you're currently accepting treatment that makes you feel small and worthless, if you're telling yourself that family obligation means enduring abuse, I want you to ask yourself this. What would your life look like if you chose yourself? What would change if you stopped waiting for permission to be happy? What dreams have you buried because someone told you they weren't important? You don't need anyone's permission to leave. You don't need to justify protecting yourself. You don't need to wait until the abuse gets bad enough to warrant action. You are enough, right now, exactly as you are, to deserve love, respect, and peace. Your story doesn't have to end the way it started. Mine didn't, and yours doesn't have to either. If this story moved you, if it resonated with your own experiences or opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced something similar? Are you currently struggling with a toxic family situation? Let's build a community of support and understanding. Your voice matters, and your story matters. Together, we can break the cycles that have held us back and build lives worth celebrating. Every day is worth celebrating. Every single one, including today, including yours.